Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 5:06 on a brand new Monday morning here in this nation. And dare I say, we're all joining together on this Monday, launching into a very different looking presidential election than when we last gathered Friday morning. We're going to get into all of the ins and outs of the RFK Jr. endorsement, what it means, what the impact might be, and whether we're okay with all this. We'll get into all that coming up. Also, at 6:05, we're going to check in with Mark Pennack from Maryland Shall Issue, talk about the latest gun law travails in the state of Maryland. At 6:35, Chris Pilkerton, former cabinet member for Trump, talk about the new interest rate announcement that happened on Friday. 7:05, Joe DeGenova will be here, and then at 7:35, Tom Fitton of Judicial Watch. Look who's back. Our long national nightmare is over. Back, well rested and ready to go. Julie Gunlock. Good morning, Julie. Welcome back from vacation.
Good morning. Good to be back.
Is it? Or would you
is.
rather sort of still be out there resting with your toes in the sand?
It's good to be back. I love the show.
All right. Yes. Well, we missed you very much, and much has happened. This is that dilemma. It's like, I can't go on vacation because too much news is going to go on. Well, you have no choice. It's going to happen. And, well, as what was anticipated and suspected for a couple of days leading up to Friday, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. made it official with a 30 to 45-minute speech that was pretty extensive and pretty specific about why he was suspending his presidential campaign and throwing his support to Donald Trump.
I began this journey as a Democrat, the party of my father, my uncle, the party which I pledged my own allegiance to long before I was old enough to vote. I attended my first Democratic convention at the age of 6 in 1960. And back then, the Democrats were the champions of the Constitution, of civil rights. The Democrats stood against authoritarianism, against censorship, against colonialism, imperialism, and unjust wars. We were the party of labor, of the working class. The Democrats were the party of government transparency and the champion of the environment. Our party was the bulwark against big money interests and corporate power. True to its name, it was the party of democracy. As you know, I left that party in October because it had departed so dramatically from the core values that I grew up with. It had become the party of war, censorship, corruption, big pharma, big tech, big ag, and big money.
Now, there's more to this, and we're going to share more with you, and we're mostly going to discuss sort of what this dynamic brings to the election, to voting, to the polls, and should, in fact, Donald Trump win, what this means to the Trump administration if RFK Jr. has a participation. And he talked about that a lot. But, Julie, I do think, and there's more here that I want to lay out here, I think one of the biggest story here is not exactly why Robert Kennedy Jr. is endorsing Trump. It's why he's absolutely has nothing to do with Kamala Harris and the Democrats. And it's no mistake that this happened the day after that ridiculous nothing of a convention where literally nothing was discussed about what this party stands for.
Yeah, I am no fan of RFK for many reasons, but his speech was incredible. And it really did highlight, particularly I took to heart what he said about the media.
Yeah.
The lack of curiosity, the fact that they're essentially an adjunct now of the Democrat Party.
Mm-hmm.
That is so important. To me, that is really the root of the problem.
Yeah.
The fact that not that they're just not asking questions, that they're not interested in asking questions. So I was really bowled over by this.
There were three rationales that were laid out. The first was freedom of speech,
yes,
encompassing the media blockade against him, the totalitarian media support for Kamala Harris, as well as social media and Twitter and all the various things that he's had to go through. And he said freedom of speech. Great, count me in. Number two, the circumstances surrounding the Ukraine war and continued funding of the Ukraine war. and the fact that there seems to be just a blank check going on here, and Trump is very interested in ending that war and making that a
again,
priority.
with that, it's sort of tied to freedom of speech. You can't even have a conversation about it.
Right, without being a puppet of Vladimir Putin, which I'm sure they're going to start calling Robert Kennedy.
Of course.
And then thirdly, and he went into great detail about, here's how this war happened, and this is where, and it goes back to Obama. It goes back to, helping to overthrow the presidency during the Obama administration and bringing in a puppet regime and all this stuff. And then his third reason had to do with children's health. It had to do with various, I wouldn't say environmental issues, but agricultural and farming issues. It made it clear to not touch fossil fuels and those parts of his rather radical environmental concerns, but some of the things about corporate farming and big agriculture, big
processed food.
I know that you've got strong feelings about that, and we're going to get into it. I want to. I will say this though, politically, that stuff does resonate with a lot of voters.
With a lot of Republicans,
with a lot of conservatives. All right, but let's get back to this, because I think what he said about, yes, the media and Kamala Harris and the Democrats is devastating.
In Chicago, a string of Democratic speakers mentioned Donald Trump 147 times just on the first day. Oh, who needs a policy when you have Trump to hate? In contrast, at the RNC convention, President Biden was mentioned only twice in 4 days. I do interviews every day. Many of you have interviewed me. Anybody who asks gets to interview me. Some days I do as many as 10. President Trump, who actually was nominated and won an election, also does interviews daily. How did the Democratic Party choose a candidate that has never done an interview or debate during the entire election cycle?
And then he pivoted, went straight at the media.
And our television networks expose themselves as Democratic Party organs. Over the course of more than a year, in a campaign where my poll numbers reached at times in the high 20s, the DNC-aligned mainstream media networks maintain a near perfect embargo on interviews with me. During his 10-month presidential campaign in 1992, Ross Perot gave 34 interviews on mainstream networks. In contrast, during the 16 months since I declared, ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, and CNN combined gave only 2 live interviews from me. Those networks instead ran a continuous deluge of hit pieces with inaccurate, often vile, pejoratives and defamatory smears. Some of those same networks and colluded with the DNC to keep me off the debate stage.
Yeah, that's 100% accurate, and we've reported on this the entire time as it transpired over the last year and a half. And, well, that stinging indictment of the Democrats and the media led Robert F. Kennedy Jr. eventually to say, yeah, I'm done. I'm done with this independent campaign where they're throwing us in court, challenging us on ballots, doing everything. Again, lawfare over election and election meddling, and toying with the system that we use to elect our representatives. He said, enough, I'm joining forces. And what that looks like and what that unity ticket looks like, as they keep talking about, we'll get into in just a moment. But he did say one thing, I thought, when he talked about the divisions in our country that was very Kennedy-esque. And frankly, he's a pretty good communicator, despite the fact that it's a struggle sometimes to hear his voice. He said, we need in this country to reach a point where we love our children more than we hate each other. And that hit me when he said that. And I was like, oh, that's kind of a Kennedy thing. They're good. They're good. They're pretty good finding the words. All right, a little bit more on this and what it really means for us conservatives. Is it really okay to replace MAGA with Maha? Maha. That's what Make America Healthy Again. I don't know if well, we'll get into it. It doesn't quite flow. We'll work on it. It's 5:15, WMAL traffic and weather every 10 minutes first on the 5s with Jamie Whitten in the Hadid Carpet Cleaning Traffic Center.
WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Live
from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
Many months ago, I promised the American people that I would withdraw from the race if I became a spoiler. A spoiler is someone who will alter the outcome of the election but has no chance of winning. In my heart, I no longer believe that I have a realistic path to electoral victory in the face of this relentless systematic censorship and media control. So I cannot in good conscience ask my staff and volunteers to keep working their long hours or ask my donors to keep giving when I cannot honestly tell them that I have a real path to the White House. Furthermore, our polling consistently showed that by staying on the ballot in the battleground states, I would likely hand the election over to the Democrats with whom I disagree on the most existential issues: censorship, war, and chronic disease. Oh, I want everyone to know that I am not terminating my campaign. I am simply suspending it and not ending it. My name, my name will remain on the ballot in most states. If you live in a blue state, you can vote for me without harming or helping President Trump or Vice President Harris. In red states, the same will apply. I encourage you to vote for me. And if enough of you do vote for me, and neither of the major party candidates win 270 votes, which is quite possible. In fact, today our polling shows them tying at 269 to 269. And I could conceivably still end up in the White House in a contingent election. But in about 10 battleground states where my presence would be a spoiler, I'm going to remove my name. And I've already started that process and urge voters not to vote for me.
By the way, a lot of people are looking at that little part of the speech saying, hey, maybe this is his plan. He's removing himself from only certain states.
Right.
And theoretically, they could get into a deadlock 269, and then it's 1800 all over again, and you've got this fight in the House of Representatives. That's not going to happen. I don't think that's a strategy. He could draw to an inside straight there. But the Trump campaign has released internal polling, and here's what they see in those battleground states. Arizona, Trump benefits by an increase of 25%. In terms of gaining a net gain if Kennedy leaves. That means, in other words, some of the voters will go to Harris, some will go to Trump, some will just stay undecided or not vote. It gives him a 25% net increase in Arizona. That's a difference maker. Georgia, 13% increase, difference maker. Michigan, it's just a 2% net increase, so it's about the same, deadlock. North Carolina, 36%. Oh. Nevada, net gain of 50%. Pennsylvania, a net gain of 13%, and Wisconsin, a net gain of 30%. In other words, according to the internal polls that, yes, granted, the Trump campaign is touting, this makes a huge difference if the election were held today.
It does. And, some people have really questioned his motives. Why is he doing this? They don't trust him. I don't trust him. I think you said this morning, I don't trust any politician. Smart attitude, honestly.
Yeah, I never trust a politician.
I do think, though, that the Kennedys, particularly RFK, are very aware of sort of history and how their biographies will be written, right, and how they will be remembered. And I will say, I think he's been pretty consistent in his support for free speech. He's been pretty consistent in his support or criticism of the press. And I think his own experience here has strengthened that. I do think his ultimate ambition is to be on the right side of history. And that is a little bit driving this, I think. Not easy going against your whole family. We saw what his sister came out with, that statement. I'm sure that we'll probably talk about that. But not easy doing what he's done. And I think people who dismiss it as some, some sort of cynical move, this can't be comfortable for him. No,
the cynical move would have been to go and kowtow to Kamala Harris so he could have a place on the stage last week at the DNC. That's the cynic. No, it's funny you should mention history because late last night, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on X put out a screenshot of an article. The headline is Goldwater and Kennedy, an Unlikely Friendship. Barry Goldwater, John F. Kennedy, Barry Goldwater, the grandfather of the modern conservative libertarian movement.
For the youngins listening, we used to be friends in Washington.
Well, and he tweeted that out and said his commentary was history rhymes. And he's likening his partnership with Donald Trump here to form a unity party and to win an election, and then for him to be able to focus on a couple of things that he's most interested in, similar to John F. Kennedy working with Barry Goldwater.
I can't help but laugh at the no labels people who are like, what is going on? We were trying to do this. This is happening organically. You think about Elon
And it will
Musk,
really make a difference.
and you think about Elon Musk. You know, there's all these videos out there of these people dancing, and they put the heads of.
Yes.
But you do think about this triumvirate, right, of Elon Musk and Trump and RFK, a few others on the outside, who are all
Tulsi Gabbard.
Tulsi Gabbard, Vivek. You know, you think of all these people that are sort of on the same, but they have many differences, but they agree that the one really important thing is free speech and a fair press, and it's. That's the no labels that everyone can agree on.
Listen, this has succeeded in a couple of things. First of all, completely just overshadowing, and everyone has forgotten the DNC. The convention is an afterthought at this point. Can anyone say anything that Kamala Harris said on Thursday night? Not a dang thing. The convention is an afterthought. It has changed the conversation, and we'll get into this. There's more to talk about, but do not underestimate the factor of RFK Jr., who hobnobs with the Hollywood elite, who is married to a Hollywood actress, who's always been sort of one of the cool kids, quirky for sure, but one of the cool kids. He's a freaking Kennedy, and he's got that Kennedy face more than any other of these, Kennedy inbred people flying around. The fact that he was standing on stage with Donald Trump, shaking his hand, wearing a MAGA hat, and saying, let's get this done. That makes a psychological shift in this election where it's not demonized anymore. It's not like having the plague or something if you actually stand up and say, yeah, I'm going to vote for Trump because I think that's the best thing for our country. That makes a huge difference too. We'll get into more of it in a moment. It's 5:24.
Now,
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
Good morning. It's 5:36. It's O'Connor and Company. We're having a blast here on this Monday morning. It is fascinating. We are witnessing history every single day, and we get to be on the front row for it. And you get to be right here with us. Coming up at 6:05, Mark Pennock, Maryland shall issue. 6:35, Charles Plickerton, a former cabinet member, talk about some interest rates maybe coming down. 7, just in time for the election. Funny how that works. Nothing political about that. 7:05, Joe DeGenova. 7:35, Tom Fitton. It's Larry O'Connor with Julie Gunlock. And Julie, we're sort of breaking down this whole new world we're living in with the Unity Party. So I want to follow up on something I was just saying, this whole idea of they've demonized Trump so much that it is career and sometimes social and family suicide to publicly say that you're supporting Donald Trump. I've seen this transpire in my own life with family members. I think we all have.
Of course.
We all have, right? And Robert Kennedy bucking his family, dealing with the slings and arrows of these despicable Kennedy brethren coming out and disavowing their brother for this move.
It's just wild. It's just wild what they've done.
And the Hollywood actors coming out against, I don't know if you saw the jerk off from West Wing.
Oh, yeah.
Bradley.
Bradley.
Or Bradford.
Bradford.
Calling out Cheryl Hines, Robert Kennedy's wife, directly on social media. Hey, Cheryl, what's up with this? Hey, your husband's...
Your despicable husband. Yeah.
Right. And this is... And suddenly we're seeing through Robert Kennedy's eyes exactly what we've all been living through for the last 8 years.
Now, don't forget also the entire Kennedy clan went to the White House on, I think, St. Patrick's Day and posed with Biden. And this was around the time where RFK was ramping up his campaign. And they posed with Biden. I mean, these, again, why you can't simply say, and her statement, I mean, she disowns him. She disavows him. She talks about how he's ruined their father's legacy or spit on their father's legacy. I mean, just shocking statement from, I think this was Carrie Kennedy.
Carrie Kennedy, yeah.
And
meanwhile, by the way, her father worked with Joe McCarthy.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
And her father opposed his brother's running mate.
Yeah.
LBJ, the sitting president of the United States.
We could go on.
He did a very public debate with Ronald Reagan during this.
Let's not forget that, her uncle killed a woman. Okay.
And then there's that.
Yeah, let's not.
That Chappaquiddick thing, we Kennedys have to stick together.
This is not a family filled with a great history here. So Carrie needs to take it down a notch. But before we start reminding her of all the misdeeds of the Kennedys over the years. I mean, if you want a shock, read this new book out called Ask Not: The Kennedys and the Women They Destroyed. This is a new book by Maureen Callahan. And my God, what the Kennedys did to the women in their lives is really disturbing. But again, Carrie Kennedy comes out. RFK is basically without a family now. Cheryl Hines is getting attacked from people in Hollywood. This isn't easy for them.
No, it's not. And yet he is all in. And he was all in with Shannon Bream yesterday on Fox News Sunday. He did the appearance at the rally with the MAGA and the Charlie Kirk and the fireworks.
Right.
And he has 3 goals here. He can go to bed every night saying, if I can do this and help him win, and it ends the war in Ukraine, and it sends a message about free speech and reforming our media, and I can have a seat at the table when it comes to nutrition issues, health issues, medical issues for children and families, then count me in. That's all. That's the beginning, middle, and end of what his priorities are.
Some of the media is also beating up on him because they said, he also tried to meet with Kamala in the Harris campaign because he has goals, and if you're smart, you will talk to anybody who helps me spread my message.
Right.
I will align with them.
It's more instructive that Kamala Harris wouldn't take his call.
Right.
And that Donald Trump said, well, sure, let's talk. If there's things that we agree on, I'll make a deal with anyone.
That's not the scandal they think it is.
Right. I know. And that's what I'm saying. There's this underlying psychological impact, I think, on the electorate where it's like, oh, my gosh, this guy is supporting Trump? I mean, I guess it can't be that bad. Maybe Trump's not the Hitler that we keep hearing about. Little things like this add up. And so I can tell you, I have friends that I used to work with in the entertainment industry, most of them comedians, actually, strangely, but some writers as well, who were all backing Kennedy. It was sort of the cool kid thing to do in L.A. If you were sort of a rebel, you were like, I'm all in for Kennedy. And each one of them all have come out for Trump now. And they were not Trump supporters before.
Wow.
But they are because of Kennedy.
Because
they are so separated from the Democrats.
Look, I don't
now.
expect anybody in sort of Northern Virginia to actually listen to what Kennedy had to say. But if you did listen to that speech that he gave, and he talked about the 3 pillars, the things that he is concerned about, if you are a reasonable person, if you are a curious person, you can't come away from that speech and not say, he's got some really valid points.
Right.
And he makes a really good case for why Trump might take those things on. You
mentioned Northern Virginia. The latest poll showed that Harris and Trump, this is like the 3rd poll in a row, they're within 3 points of each other. Kennedy's polling at 7% in Virginia right now. So watch that space.
I'm going to be campaigning actively. I think President Trump is going to make a series of announcements about other Democrats who are joining his campaign. And I want to make America healthy again, and so does President Trump. So I'm
other Democrats who will be joining the campaign as well. And again, listen, I'm just as suspicious of Democrats too. I'd love to win this thing outright, but we got to not be naive. This is what happens in other countries. Oftentimes, you have to come up with a unity ticket to be able to defeat the dominant party, especially the one that has the media in the back pocket. If that's what it takes to stop Kamala Harris and the Democrats, I'm open to these conversations. And so far, when it comes to Kennedy, it looks okay. But that whole Make America Healthy Again thing, what does that look like? Well, we're going to get into the details of that in a moment. It's 5:43.
Download the WMAL app to stream us for free.
You want to know that the food that you're feeding them is not filled with chemicals that are going to give them cancer and chronic disease. And don't you want a president that's going to make America healthy again? Thank you all very, very much, and God bless you, and God bless America.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr., his debut alongside Donald Trump at that rally in Phoenix, Arizona. And now, Julie, we have talked about this. You have studied and written about this for many years of your public life, about big ag, big food, the processed food issues, pesticides, all this stuff, chemicals in your food. A lot of it is overstated. I think it's fair to say
it's actually most of it is pushed by radical environmental groups and RFK. Everybody I get the excitement about RFK. Everybody needs to remember the guy's a bit of a loon,
right?
When it comes to, I mean, you think
he's demonized fossil fuel industry.
You think Don Beyer wants to take your gas stove? Okay, this guy, you're gonna be cooking on a fire out in your backyard.
Yeah, but there's no way. Drill baby drill is so important to Trump that there's no way that he's going to come anywhere near that.
Fine.
But what about the agriculture? Because this resonates with people who do think that the food industry has gotten out of control.
There is this idea out there. You know, they did a Fox News segment with Rachel Campos Duffy this weekend and talking about how our food is just it's all poison. There is something called detection. There is something called improvements in the medical industry. We are living longer. When you live longer, you aren't killed by other things. You're killed by cancer, right? The longer you live, you're likely going to get cancer. Childhood obesity is a major problem, but like many things, it's not just the food that causes childhood obesity. It's the sedentary lives of our children. It's the expansion of the school lunch program. It is phones. There are a lot of factors. And when Kennedy says something, and I know we got to go, but when Kennedy says something like, you know, get chemicals out of your food, that's called preservatives, and that's why your bread doesn't turn green the day you bring it back from the grocery store. There are tiny, tiny, tiny amounts of preservatives that are put in food that keep them fresh and on the shelves longer, and that helps lower the costs. So I just ask people to look, there's a lot of things in the food industry and in the food sort of system in America that can improve, but I think there's some demonization going on that bothers me a little bit.
How this relates to Trump's already pre-existing agenda for, you know, energy independence and more self-sufficiency here in the government, here in this country, I think does actually harmonize and work in that I'm shocked to see how much livestock we import now.
Yes.
Fresh pork, beef.
Absolutely.
We shouldn't be importing pork and beef from anywhere else. We should let our farmers raise it, but our farmers can't afford to raise it anymore. And even if you do find a person who has a small cattle ranch and you want to buy their steaks, you're not allowed to. You have to go through processing.
I do think that I'm not for the total ban on importing goods because, look, there is a limit. There's some, for instance, weirdly, in Peru, they grow asparagus and they do it really well. And we import a lot of our asparagus from Peru. I don't necessarily think we need to cut off Peruvian asparagus growers because we want someone in Idaho to do it. I believe in sort of world trade and all of this, but I do agree with you that it's really disturbing how we've lowered sort of animal livestock raising in this country. And that is due to regulations, and it's due to environmentalists who demonize ranchers and cattle ranchers. But then,
and it's
and
not
meat producers.
It's not a myth that Bill Gates is buying up a bunch of agricultural land, and then it's getting destroyed and not allowed to raise.
Because he wants us all to go to a vegan lifestyle.
Right,
I
and
agree
eat
with
soybeans.
You. I 100% agree with you.
And our children, especially young men, getting so much extra soy in their diet that's producing a hell of a lot of estrogen for little boys, which is not a great thing for them. Well,
that is. I think you have to. I think you have to eat tremendous amount of soy for that to actually be an issue.
Well, kids, young men from the age of 12 to 17, 18, they're drinking a lot of protein shakes.
Sure.
And if it's soy versus whey protein, it makes a difference.
Yeah.
I think I'm with that. That is a lot of soy. If you're drinking, you know how boys are when they work out.
I have one.
I know. That's why I'm saying know. And if they're drinking all those protein shakes,
he knows all about. He's a whey protein guy,
right? See, exactly.
Yeah.
Because
look, I think
I
think it is worth talking about, and I think that it is worth. And that's the thing.
That's the key. The Democrats aren't even touching this stuff.
Right.
This is something that moms and dads are talking about with their friends and with their kids on a regular basis, and suddenly now it's one of the talking points of the Trump campaign.
Yes, but
with someone with
I think
credibility.
it's really also important important when RFK is talking about his problem with the food system. He wants to switch entirely to organic food. We will starve,
we can't
and we will starve with no money in the bank.
Some chemicals are very good.
Pesticides are a wonder. There is a green revolution that happened, and the reason we didn't all starve in the 60s and 70s is because of the green revolution and the development of a lot of these agrochemicals that have made yields higher.
I think we'll find a good balance there, and I think it'll help if Kennedy's voters all vote for Trump.
I agree.
5:53.